The Forbidden Letter. Chapter 1, Whispers in the Court. The scent of beeswax and lavender lingered in the air as Isabella de Rojas walked the grand corridors of the Royal Alcázar of Madrid. The polished marble beneath her slippers gleamed under the flickering light of torches, casting long shadows on the gilded tapestries that adorned the walls. She moved with practiced grace, her hands folded before her, the image of a dutiful lady-in-waiting. Yet beneath the careful composure, her mind was restless. Tonight, the Queen had dismissed her early, allowing her a rare moment of solitude. She relished the quiet, for it was in these stolen moments that she could think freely, something dangerous for a woman in her position. As she neared her chambers, a passing pageboy hesitated, then pressed a folded letter into her hand before disappearing down the hall. Isabella frowned. She had not been expecting a letter. Curious and cautious, she slipped into her room, bolting the heavy oak door behind her. Candle light flickered as she unfolded the parchment, her eyes scanning the elegant script. "My dearest, your silence torments me. Have I been forgotten, or is this caution? The walls have ears, I know, but my heart is reckless. Tell me you are safe. Tell me you still dream of our escape." The signature was absent, but the passion in the words was unmistakable. Isabella's breath hitched. This was no letter for her. She should have destroyed it. Tossed it into the fireplace and let the flames consume its dangerous contents. But something in the words held her captive. Who was this forbidden lover? Who had risked so much for a reply? Her fingers traced the ink, the lingering warmth of the parchment suggesting it had only recently been written. A knock on her door made her start. She thrust the letter into her skirts before composing herself. Yes. The door creaked open, revealing Beatriz Mendoza, another lady-in-waiting. She was sharp-eyed and ever observant, a woman who prided herself on knowing every secret in the court. "The Queen will require you at first light," Beatriz said, stepping inside without invitation. Her gaze swept over Isabella's chamber. "You retired early tonight?" "I was not feeling well," Isabella replied smoothly. Beatriz's lips quirked. "Strange, then, that you look perfectly well now." Isabella forced a smile. "Rest does wonders." Beatriz lingered a moment longer, her gaze drifting toward the desk where Isabella had set the letter down, half hidden beneath a lace handkerchief. Isabella resisted the urge to move toward it. Finally, Beatriz nodded and turned to leave. "Sleep well, Isabella." The door shut, and Isabella let out a slow breath. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She turned back to the letter, the reckless part of her whispering a single thought. Chapter 2, A Dangerous Exchange. Isabella paced her chamber, the flickering candlelight casting restless shadows on the walls. The letter sat before her, its ink dark and elegant, the words seared into her mind. Miguel de Almeida. A Portuguese nobleman. A man she had never met, and yet, his words had reached her soul in a way no courtly conversation ever had. She knew the risk of responding. The Queen's court was a place of beauty and refinement, but beneath the polished veneer lay a nest of vipers, ladies-in-waiting who whispered secrets for favors, courtiers who traded information like coin. Spain and Portugal remained uneasy neighbors after years of war, and any association with a Portuguese noble could be considered treasonous. And yet, Isabella could not ignore the pull of those words. His letter was not one of political intrigue or ambition but of longing, of a mind seeking connection beyond duty and title. She reached for her quill, her fingers trembling. "Señor de Almeida," she wrote carefully. "Your letter came to me by accident, yet I find myself unable to discard it. Your words speak of a longing that I understand well. In the heart of the Spanish court, amid music and finery, I, too, have felt the weight of solitude. If only for a moment, let us speak not as subjects of opposing crowns, but as two souls seeking understanding." She hesitated, then signed only with the initial I. The next challenge was delivering it. She could not trust the palace messengers' too many curious hands, too many prying eyes. Instead, she turned to an unexpected ally. The next morning, as she made her way through the bustling marketplace under the watchful escort of a chaperone, Isabella subtly slipped the folded parchment to an orange seller, a woman who had once been her nursemaid. The woman's knowing nod was all the reassurance Isabella needed. Days passed before the reply arrived. A small, unassuming slip of parchment pressed into her hand by the same orange seller. Heart-pounding, Isabella waited until she was alone to read it. Señorita I. Your words are a gift I did not expect, nor did I dare hope for. I shall not question fate, only honor it. Tell me, do you believe a person can truly belong to a country, or do we belong only to ourselves? A slow smile formed on Isabella's lips. This was dangerous. But she would write again. Chapter 3, Secrets and Betrayals. The Queen's court was alive with whispers. Isabella moved carefully through the gilded halls, her expression serene, her hands folded primly before her. To any observer, she was simply another lady in waiting, attentive, obedient, unremarkable. But beneath the layers of silk and composure, her heart pounded with the weight of her secret. The letters continued. Each one carried through the hands of her old nursemaid, each reply from Miguel more daring, more intoxicating than the last. He spoke of philosophy, of poetry, of dreams. He questioned the rigid lines of loyalty and country. And Isabella found herself opening up in ways she never had before. But secrets were never safe in court. It started subtly, an extra glance from Dona Elena, one of the Queen's favored attendants. A knowing smirk from a courtier. Isabella told herself she was imagining it, but the unease in her chest grew heavier. Then, one evening, as she sat in the Queen's private chamber embroidering, Dona Elena leaned closer. "You've been rather distracted, Isabella," she murmured, just loud enough for only them to hear. Isabella's fingers paused over the delicate golden thread she had been weaving into the fabric. "I don't know what you mean." Elena's lips curved. "Oh, but I think you do. A little bird told me that you have taken an interest in foreign correspondence. Dangerous, don't you think?" Ice threaded through Isabella's veins, but she did not let it show. She met Elena's gaze with carefully measured indifference. "Gossip is a fickle thing, Dona Elena. Perhaps your little bird is mistaken." Elena chuckled softly, as if amused, but there was something sharp in her eyes. "Perhaps. But we both know that the Queen's advisors do not take such matters lightly. I would hate for someone of your delicate position to be caught in a web of treason." She rose gracefully and drifted away, leaving Isabella struggling to keep her breath steady. That night, Isabella did not sleep. She paced her chamber, clutching Miguel's latest letter in her trembling hands. Had she been careless? Had someone seen the exchange? If word reached the Queen's advisors, there would be no mercy. A knock at her door made her jump. Heart pounding, she quickly hid the letter beneath the folds of her pillow before opening the door a fraction. It was her old nursemaid, her expression grim. "They are searching chambers tonight." Isabella's blood ran cold. Without hesitation, she rushed to the fireplace and dropped the letter into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, the words disappearing before her eyes. She could not afford to hesitate. A moment later, heavy footsteps sounded in the corridor. She turned, schooling her features into perfect calm just as the Queen's guards entered her chamber. Would they find something? Had she made a mistake? Isabella lifted her chin, forcing herself to breathe. Chapter 4, Love on the Run. The guards tore through Isabella's chamber with ruthless efficiency. Drawers were overturned, linens shaken out, books flung open in search of hidden messages. Isabella stood motionless, her hands clasped before her, her face carefully composed. She had burned Miguel's letter in time. There was nothing left but ash. The captain of the guard narrowed his eyes at her. "You seem rather calm, Dona Isabella." She met his gaze without flinching. "Why should I not be? I have nothing to hide." He studied her for a moment longer, then gave a curt nod. Very well. He gestured to his men. We are done here. The door shut behind them, and Isabella released the breath she had been holding. She had survived for now. But she could not ignore the warning. The Queen's advisors were watching. The next letter from Miguel arrived 2 days later, hidden within a basket of oranges. Mi Estrella. I have heard whispers of danger. If you are in trouble, tell me. I will not stand idly by while you are in harm's way. Tell me where to meet you, and I shall be there. It was reckless. Foolish. But Isabella could not resist. That night, under the pretense of attending a courtly masquerade, she slipped away from the palace, her heart hammering against her ribs. The streets of Madrid were alive with music and revelry, disguising the danger lurking in the shadows. Miguel was waiting in the courtyard of an abandoned chapel, his dark cloak blending with the night. When their eyes met, a breath caught in Isabella's throat. I feared you would not come, he murmured, stepping closer. And yet here I am, she whispered. For a moment, the world disappeared. He took her hands, his touch warm despite the chill in the air. This cannot go on, he said. They will not stop until they find proof against you. She knew he was right. But the thought of stopping of silence was unbearable. What do we do? She asked. He hesitated, then spoke the words she had not dared to voice. We leave. Isabella's breath caught. Leave. Miguel nodded. Come with me to Portugal. I have friends, allies. There, you would be safe. It was madness. To abandon her life, her position, the only world she had ever known. And yet, for the first time, she saw a future that belonged to her. Yes, she whispered. Miguel exhaled, pulling her into his arms. But before he could speak, a sharp voice cut through the night. There you are. Isabella's blood turned to ice. Dona Elena stepped into the courtyard, flanked by 2 guards. You disappoint me, Isabella, she said, her tone smooth with triumph. Did you truly think you could hide your betrayal? Miguel moved protectively in front of Isabella, his hand shifting toward the hilt of his sword. They had been caught. And there was no turning back. Chapter 5, A Perilous Choice. Isabella's heart pounded as Dona Elena stepped closer, her dark eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The guards flanked her like silent shadows, their hands resting on their swords. You have been very foolish, Isabella, Elena murmured. I warned you, did I not? Miguel shifted beside her, his muscles tense. Let her go, he said, his voice steady despite the danger. She has done nothing wrong. Elena tilted her head, feigning pity. You are mistaken, Señor de Almeida. A lady-in-waiting secretly corresponding with a Portuguese noble in times such as these? That is treason. Isabella's blood turned to ice. Treason. The word alone could seal her fate. She knew the punishment well: imprisonment, exile, or worse. Miguel's hand brushed hers, a silent reassurance. But she could not allow him to risk his life for her. Elena, Isabella said, keeping her voice level, what is it you want? Elena smiled, a slow, cruel thing. Loyalty. And for you to remember your place. She gestured to the guards. You will come back to the palace with me. If you confess your wrongdoing, perhaps the Queen will be merciful. A cold dread coiled in Isabella's stomach. A confession would mean denouncing Miguel, turning him into an enemy of Spain. She could not do it. Miguel took a step forward. And if she refuses? Elena sighed. Then she will be imprisoned until the Queen decides her fate. Her gaze flickered to Miguel. And you? A foreign noble caught sneaking into the Spanish court? I imagine your punishment would be less merciful. The threat hung heavy in the air. Isabella's mind raced. There had to be a way out. She glanced at Miguel, searching his face for an answer. His eyes burned with determination, but there was something else, something hidden. A plan. Then, suddenly, a deafening crack echoed through the courtyard as Miguel lunged, striking one of the guards across the face. Chaos erupted. Miguel grabbed Isabella's hand and ran. They darted through the darkened streets, boots pounding against the cobblestones. Shouts rang behind them, the guards giving chase. "We won't outrun them for long," Isabella gasped. Miguel pulled her into a narrow alleyway, pressing her against the cold stone wall. "There is another way." She looked up at him, breathless. "Tell me." His expression was fierce. "We flee tonight. To Portugal." Isabella's heart twisted. Leaving now meant abandoning everything: her home, her family, her life in the Spanish court. But staying meant death. She swallowed hard, gripping his hand tighter. "Then let's go." Miguel exhaled, pressing a brief, desperate kiss to her forehead. Then he pulled her forward, deeper into the night. The chase was not over. But neither was their fight for freedom. Chapter 6, Flight into the Unknown. The night swallowed them whole as they ran, their breath ragged, their hands clasped so tightly that Isabella could feel the frantic beat of Miguel's pulse against her own. Behind them, the shouts of the guards still rang through the streets, echoing off the stone walls of Madrid. They had no time. Miguel led her through a maze of alleyways, past sleeping houses and shuttered windows, until they reached a waiting horse tethered behind a crumbling chapel. He turned to her, eyes burning with urgency. "Can you ride?" "Yes," she gasped. "Then we must go now." He helped her onto the horse before swinging up behind her. The moment his arms circled her waist, he snapped the reins, and the horse surged forward, galloping into the darkness. Madrid fell away behind them. The road to Portugal was treacherous. They travelled by night, hiding in forests and abandoned farmhouses, stopping only when exhaustion threatened to overtake them. Miguel had planned well: he had gold, food, and allies who provided them shelter along the way. But danger was never far. On the third night, they heard hoofbeats pounding in the distance. "Spanish riders! They've found us," Miguel muttered. Panic clawed at Isabella's chest. "What do we do?" Miguel's jaw tightened. "We split up. You take the horse and follow the river west. I'll lead them south." "No," she grabbed his hand. "I won't leave you." He cupped her face, his touch both fierce and gentle. "We will find each other again. I swear it." Tears burned her eyes, but she nodded. With one last lingering look, Miguel turned and disappeared into the trees. Isabella kicked the horse into a gallop, her heart breaking with every mile. Days passed. Then a week. She reached the Portuguese border alone. Miguel was nowhere to be found. Every day, she waited. Every night, she read and reread his last letter, the ink smudged from her fingers. "Mi Estrella. If we are separated, know this: I will find you. If it takes a lifetime, I will find you." And so she waited. Until, one quiet morning, a familiar figure stepped through the mist. Miguel. He was battered, weary but alive. A broken sob escaped her lips as she ran to him, and when he caught her in his arms, she knew the truth in his words. They were free. And they had found each other again. The end.